IRS Form 4137, Social Security and Medicare tax on unreported tip income. So before we get into this tax form, there are probably a couple of things that we should point out. First of all, the purpose of this tax form is to figure the Social Security and Medicare tax that's owed on tips that you previously did not report to your employer. This might also include any allocated tips that were shown on your Form W-2 that you must report as income. So by filing this form, your Social Security and Medicare tips will be credited to your Social Security record. When you go to file for Social Security benefits, your Social Security record calculation will inform how much Social Security you receive. So when you don't pay Social Security taxes, the result is that you may end up with less Social Security. So by filing this form, you're correcting the record, even if you have to pay additional tax, because your reported Social Security income will be higher and you'll be credited for that extra income. Now you must file IRS Form 4137 if you received cash or charge tips of $20 or more in a calendar month, but you did not report those tips to your employer. So you must also file Form 4137 if your W-2 Box 8 shows allocated tips that you must report as income. So you could have done everything perfectly appropriately, but if your reporter or your employer reported allocated tips that went onto your W-2, you have to use this form to report those allocated tips. So if you reported tips to your employer, they're subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. They may be subject to additional Medicare tax if your income is high enough, and then regular income tax withholding. So if you don't report tips to your employer, you may be charged a penalty that's equal to 50% of the taxes that would have been due on those tips, specifically the Social Security, Medicare, and possibly additional Medicare taxes. So you can avoid this penalty if you show that your failure to report tips to your employer was due to reasonable cause and not due to willful neglect. So the IRS has a publication 531, on reporting tip income with additional information. So we're going to go through this tax form through our hero John Doe. So his name goes at the top with the Social Security number. If you're married, you may need to, and both spouses have unreported tip income, then each of you will need to complete a separate Form 4137. And again, this will go with your tax return. So in line 1, John Doe only has one employer, Acme Bar and Grill. We've put the employer identification number, as well as in column C, the total cash and charge tips that you received for the year. So we're just saying $1,000. And the total cash and charge tips that you reported. So $500 was reported to your employer, and in this case, $500 was not. So specifically, the form instructions state that all cash and charge tips that you received must be included in column C and D as appropriate. Specifically, total tips that you reported to your employer on time, meaning by the 10th day of the month following the month that you reported them or that you received them. Tips that you received in December of a year, but you reported them to your employer at the end of the year, but before that deadline, that's considered income for the following tax year. So for example, if you received tip income in December, you reported it to your employer after December 31st, but before January 10th of 2023, and this was for tips reported or that you received in December 2022, then you would include those in income for 2023 not for 2022. So if you're filing this for tax year 2022, you would not include the December 2022 tips that you reported to your employer in January 2023. Those would go on your 2023 Form 4137. In addition, any tips that you did not report on time, any tips that you received but you weren't required to report them because they were under the $20 threshold for that month. So all of those should go into line C. So in line 2, or column C. So in line 2, we're going to total up everything in column C. We get $1,000, but if we had multiple employers, you would enter the total. And then in line 3, we total everything that was in column D, so $500 of tips that we reported. And then in line 4, we subtract line 3 from line 2. So we have $500 worth of tips that we must include on line 1C of your Form 1040, 1040SR, or 1040NR. So in line 5, we'll say $100 of cash and charge tips that did not get reported because the total was less than $20 in a month. So specifically, those tips are not subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. So we're going to back those out right here. Line 6, we're going to subtract line 5 from line 4, and we come up with $400. So in line 7 is the maximum Social Security wage base for the year for 2022. That amount was $147,000. In line 8, we're going to put the total wages and Social Security tips shown on all Form W-2s and any railroad compensation pay forms. So Social Security wages are in box 3 of your W-2. Social Security tips are in box 7. And for this scenario, we just entered $52,000. We're subtracting line 8 from line 7, and if line 8 is more than 7, you would enter 0. In this case, it is less than 7, so we enter $95,000. So in line 10, we're going to choose the smaller of either the $400 on line 6 or the $95,000 on line 9. If you received tips as a federal, state, or local government employee, then if line 6 includes tips that you receive for work in that area and your pay was only subject to the 1.45% Medicare tax, subtract those tips from the line 6 amount only for the purpose of comparing line 6 and line 9. Don't actually reduce this number. Simply write 1.45% tips and the amount that you subtracted on the dotted line right here on line 10. So this is only if you're a federal, state, or local government employee. In this case, that doesn't apply to our hero John Doe since he has not maxed out the Social Security wage and tip income limit. We're going to multiply this $400 by 6.2%, which is the Social Security rate. We come up with slightly less than $25. We round up. And then in line 12, we'll multiply this amount by 1.45%, which is the Medicare tax rate. We come up with about $6. And we add those two together. We come up with $31. We're going to enter that here at the bottom of this form, but also on Schedule 2, which is the schedule that contains all the additional taxes, specifically line 5. If you're filing Form 1040 PR, you'll put that in Part 1, line 6. If you're filing 1040 SS, Part 1, line 6. So for additional detail, you'll have to refer to your tax return instructions. So this is a fairly straightforward form. That's all we have for this video. If you want more information specifically about completing this form, we've written a comprehensive article, which you can find on our website. Simply go to teachmepersonalfinance.com type in IRS Form 4137 in the search bar, and you should see our article appear. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.